Okay, good afternoon and thank you all for coming. Today we have Thinking Beyond Borders founder Robin Pendoley to talk about his organization and their intent to develop global leadership through education. There are many nonprofits addressing the symptoms of our greatest global challenges. However, there are few that seek to create proactive fundamental change. Thinking Beyond Borders is one of those organizations. Robin has a degree in International Development Studies from UCLA and a Master's of Education from Harvard. He spent 10 years working and teaching in public schools where he challenges students to question their assumptions about themselves and the world. He spent the last 2 years with his partners to develop this innovative approach to global change. So just to let people know, this talk will be public and on the internet, so please keep all confidential questions till after. So now, without further ado, let me introduce Robin Pendoley.
Hello, thank you for coming. Sorry for the late start. I am Robin Pendoley, and I'm one of the founders. There are three of us. I'm one of the founders of Thinking Beyond Borders. Chris Stockich is one of the other founders. Sandy Pendoley is the other founder. She's my wife. That's why we have the same name. And I want to thank Kylie for hosting us today. This is feels like a great opportunity to speak to folks who are hopefully of like minds to what we're doing. So Thinking Beyond Borders, I'm here to introduce it to you because I'm sure it's new to all of you. But Thinking Beyond Borders, our mission is to help students become proactive agents of change who have global consciousness and who have the skills to translate their learning into action. That's a lot. I'll talk more about it. So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to address some really specific problems. And we think that this mission that I just explained to you will help to address those specific problems. The specific problems that we're talking about are pretty huge, though. I mean, we're all familiar with the familiar looming disasters, right? There's global warming and the possible global destruction that it could cause, not just to humans and to our buildings and coastal areas, but to wildlife, to the global climate, life as we know it on planet Earth. There's the war in Iraq. There's conflicts brewing in Iran. There's genocide in Sudan. There's global hunger. 1 in 5 people in the world live in extreme poverty on less than $1 a day. So these are all the familiar looming disasters that we hear about on a daily basis that are very real and that people are working to address right now, but a lot of those things, particularly things like world hunger and global climate change. These are things that have been coming for a long time, and we haven't solved them yet. We haven't come up with proactive solutions to prevent these things from happening and to come up with solutions that will take us into the future in a way that's productive. We face a flattening world where the US consciousness in particular, our public consciousness, has not kept up with the flattening of production and consumption. It hasn't kept up with the concept that the United States no longer has these borders, economic borders, geographic borders that can't be crossed. We also live in a world where we have underexploited human potential. We live in a time where there is more wealth, there's more technological ability than ever before, far more than ever before. These are resources that could allow us to address these huge looming disasters. Not to mention the small disasters, the personal disasters that happen for small children who live in the inner city in the United States, or for mothers who live in rural Vietnam, or wherever it may be in the world. We have the potential, but it's drastically underexploited because we don't develop the leadership that knows how to truly access those potentials and has the perspective to understand the world that we live in so that we can apply those skills, we can apply that technology, we can apply that wealth to actually addressing those issues effectively and proactively. So, Thinking Beyond Borders, we're an educational organization. What we intend to do is we intend to offer gap year programs, students who have graduated from high school and are deferring their freshman year of college. They spend an entire academic year with us, September to May, beginning in September 2008, that's our first program year. And they travel the world for 6 months, the first 6 months of their program. They're going to stop in 5 separate core countries for a month at a time, doing service learning projects. So for example, they'll stop in Bolivia for a month. They'll live with a homestay family. They'll work with one specific NGO looking at how to provide clean water to communities that don't otherwise have access. They then head to South Africa, where they work with one NGO working on HIV and AIDS prevention, and they live with a host family for that month. They then head to India, and they work in sustainable agriculture. They head to China, and they work in education. Then they head to Vietnam, and they work in environmental protection. So that at the end of this 6 months, these students walk away with a pretty broad perspective of global cultures, of the reality of what it means to live in communities around the world, both urban and rural. They have an understanding of what the global issues are that we're facing, major global issues. And they've worked with the people that are out there on the ground working to address those issues. So they have a pretty solid understanding of what approaches people are taking, what's working and what isn't. They've seen it firsthand on the ground. Now, as an educator, I can tell you it's important for students to be able to process this learning, all of these observations. So in between each of these month-long homestays, there's a week-long enrichment week. After Bolivia, after their month, they travel to neighboring Peru, and they spend a week trekking to Machu Picchu. During that week, they engage different pieces of the curriculum that challenge them to reflect on the experiences that they had in Bolivia. Not just so that they learn more about Bolivia, but that they learn more about themselves in relation to Bolivia as Americans, so that they learn more about the rest of the world and the lessons that they can learn about the rest of the world through the Bolivian perspective. After South Africa, they spend a week in Kruger National Park. In India, depending on the political situation, they're likely to head to Sri Lanka, where they'll engage in ecotourism activities. So you can see how this program is really arranged to give students a very, very expansive experience around the world. At the end of 6 months, they return to the United States. And once they return to the United States, they spend 6 weeks meeting with policymakers, the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, talking about initiatives for development, hearing what initiatives are coming up, having the opportunity to share with policymakers their perspectives. They are also putting together presentations of their learning. These are presentations that reflect their personal growth and their understanding of the world around them, of the things that they saw, that they observed. And they travel to meet with student and philanthropy groups around the country to share their learning with these groups, to raise awareness about the issues, and to raise funds for those NGOs they worked with abroad. The end goal is really to produce a student who has the tools to go to college and start their first day of college saying, I have a really good idea of what potential I have to create change in the world. I have a really good idea of what is out there in the world that needs to happen and that needs to change. And I have a pretty good idea of what direction I'm going to head in, what specific direction. So that those 4 years of college are an effective period of time when they can collect the tools, collect the skills they need to leave college and actually begin pursuing a career of creating change in the world. And that could be at all levels. It could be a CEO of a corporation. It could be someone who starts a nonprofit. It could be someone who's a doctor and chooses to spend 2 months of the year working abroad in a developing nation. Now, as part of this, there's also a curriculum that the students follow. Service learning, generally speaking, is followed by a curriculum that challenges students to reflect upon themselves and reflect upon the experience. To be able to do that, they're growing in groups of 16 students. Each program group has 16 students in it. And they're traveling with 3 staff members. As a group, they do a lot of work together to have discussions, to articulate, challenge the students to articulate their observations and their thoughts, and then to work together to synthesize all of that information and each other's observations into new conclusions that are powerful, that will push their thinking about themselves and the world. To help them do that, and to help them put it in a stronger global context that's effective, we're going to help the students by providing a foundation of understanding about economics, about political science, about culture and social change, so that they'll be able to really understand these things on a broad level and root them in academia and an academic understanding of the world as well. So clearly, we're an educational organization, but we're also a development organization. We're creating partnerships with NGOs, unique partnerships, where those NGOs that are hosting us abroad are providing educational services. They're meeting with our students. The experts that work in those organizations on the ground facing these issues every day sit down with our students and say, hey, this is what our community needs. These are the issues it's facing. this is what our organization needs to survive, and this is the approach we're taking. They're providing that expertise and those educational services to us. In exchange, our students are providing service. We work with them to create, we work with the NGO to create service projects that actually forward the mission of the NGO abroad. A lot of times, 18-year-olds will go to do service either here in the United States or in countries abroad, working with nonprofits, and their presence is actually more of a hindrance than it is a help. We look to create service projects that will actually allow the students to do something with their hands, with their skills, that will actually forward the mission of the organization. But their primary responsibility as students there is to learn. So we're a development organization. We're also a service organization. Our students go and they do the physical service with those development organizations abroad, those host NGOs. But they also come back to the United States and they educate people around the country about what the issues are, about global cultures, and they help to raise funds and awareness for those organizations abroad by speaking with different groups here in the United States. So we're also a service organization. The last piece of this that is critical is that the three founders, when we sat down, we recognized the importance of creating not just these different levels of the organization, of becoming an educational organization, a development and a service organization, but that we really wanted to create a community of conscious individuals who are committed to creating change in the world. Now, that community starts at a level of the students. They're our base. The students are chosen for their ability to engage communities. They have to demonstrate that they are high achievers in their communities, not necessarily academically, because not all students learn well in the classroom, but that they have to demonstrate that they've reached out to their community and they've made a commitment there. They have to demonstrate that they've made a commitment to the specific things that they care about as an individual as well, not just what's out in their community, but things that they're really passionate about. These are the students that are showing that they're ready, they're mature enough to head out into the world and to engage this type of experience. But then we also have the alumni as part of our community. These are students that have graduated from our program, gone to college, gone to graduate school, gone off into their careers, and they continue to come back to our community to provide support. Maybe it's providing financial support to give a scholarship to a student. Or maybe it's simply saying, hey, you have X student who's interested in starting a nonprofit. Well, I started a nonprofit in that same city. I can be a mentor to them. And Thinking Beyond Borders has a commitment to supporting their alumni by helping them to network, helping them to identify the resources that are out there to pursue the change efforts that they plan to pursue as they translate their learning into action throughout their lives. We also see ourselves as having a committed group of individuals who are out there and organizations who are out there supporting Thinking Beyond Borders, either financially or with their abilities. Kylie is a great example of a member of the Thinking Beyond Borders community who said, I've got a way that I can help. I can host you. I can host this event so that you can meet other individuals who might be interested in joining the community in whatever way they can and offer whatever support that they can. So Kylie's a great example of the type of person who's out there who is committed to creating change, who is conscious and wants to be part of the community. That's kind of an overview of who we are. Now, when we started building the organization, we realized three assumptions based on our own experiences working in nonprofits. And when we built our business plan, we built them based on our understanding of these three assumptions. The first assumption is that nonprofits often spend an enormous amount of time and staff, energy, and resources simply fundraising to survive, right? And we also understood that fundraising often challenges the integrity of the program design of a nonprofit. Now, what I mean by that is that nonprofits often say, well, there are these grants out there, we're going to apply for that grant. We don't totally fit that grant. But if we just kind of tweak what we're offering and we tweak our mission just a little bit, we'll apply for that grant and we'll be able to get it. And we'll just have to change our services a little bit. We had no desire to do that. Our desire was to develop a program that would truly create students who have the capacity to be proactive agents of change and to not walk away from the integrity of our program at any point. So when we designed our program, we designed it so that after beginning the first program year, September 2008, it will be self-sufficient on student tuition alone, indefinitely. As long as there's students interested in doing this, which our experiences so far in the last 2 years talking about this with folks, and our market research shows that there is no end of interest for students who want to take a gap year. That there are lots and lots of them out there. Harvard University, for example, sends out their letter of acceptance saying, congratulations, you've been accepted. We really encourage you to defer for a year and go do something else that's substantive. We're it. There aren't a whole lot of us out there. There are really only 2 or 3 other programs around the country that are offering full academic gap years. So that was part of it. The second thing was that we also realized that there were startup costs involved. And so we're fundraising for those startup costs. $240,000 to do our fundraising for that first year. We're targeting individuals mainly, individuals who we can really access by saying, hey, we need visionary individuals who really believe that this is a way to create social change. And so what we've moved away from a lot of the foundations that are out there either A, don't like starting startups, or B, like I said before, we don't really apply to them. Yes, we're education, yes, we're a development organization, but a lot of them that are working in education want to do urban education, and a lot of them that are working in development want to provide specific services to specific communities, either preventing HIV and AIDS or preventing the spread of tuberculosis or malaria or whatever it may be. We don't really fall under the parameters of any of those grant-giving foundations. So that's the approach that we're taking to fund the organization so that we can maintain the integrity of the organization, almost at all costs. We really believe in what we've designed that much. 2, the second assumption was that the program should be accessible to as many people, if not everyone, as possible, regardless of financial need. Now, the program price tag is $35,000 for the year. It's about the cost of what a year of college would be. And we really see this as the best first year of college that you could have. What better way to prepare for 4 years of college so that you actually benefit from all 4 years of college? Rather than, like a lot of myself and a lot of my friends, we studied abroad in our junior or senior year, came back and suddenly realized, oh, I get it now. I know what I have at my fingertips here. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that for each program group of 16 students, that cost of $35,000 allows us to offer 3 full scholarships to that group of 16. So 3 out of 16, automatically we can offer full scholarships. Or we can break those up and offer partial scholarships to more than just 3 students. That makes it more accessible. But still, we recognize that $35,000 puts this program out of reach for the vast majority of students around the United States. So the last thing that we did was, by creating a self-sustaining nonprofit, the only fundraising that we ever have to do after that first startup year is 4 scholarships. Is to provide scholarships to students, which as an educational organization is the absolute easiest fundraising you could ever do. In fact, in this past year of starting to talk more and more with folks about the organization that we've designed, and in the last couple months of fundraising, these early stages of the fundraising campaign, we've found that more and more individuals are saying to us, well, you know, as a company, as an organization, we don't feel comfortable funding a startup, but when the first program year starts, we'd be more than happy to offer a scholarship. We've had 3 offers like that already for the first program year. So we're very optimistic about our ability to provide scholarships, enough scholarships to make the program accessible to as many students as possible. The last one is that the program integrity must be protected throughout the development and growth phase of the organization. Now, you've heard, I've already mentioned a few ways that we're doing that. The other key way is that we do not have a desire to grow as fast as possible. One of the benefits of being a nonprofit is that we don't have to make a profit. We don't have to worry about generating a profit and putting as many students out there in the field as we can as quickly as possible. Our first 2 program years will include just one program group of 16 students each year. Sandy and I will be traveling as 2 of the 3 staff members, so that she as the program director and I as the curriculum director can work with the curriculum that we've put together, work with the program design, and make sure that it works for the students, that it works for the host communities, and that at the end of the day, it's really meeting that mission of creating proactive agents of change who can translate their learning into action. So we can really perfect the model before we begin adding more students to that same itinerary and adding additional itineraries as we go. So that's the basics. I want to open up to a few questions. We have a bit of time for a few questions, but I really want to thank you for coming out. I want to thank you for coming to learn about this. It's something that, on the personal note, this is everything I've ever wanted to do in my life, all in one place. Travel the world, help students learn about the world, and help to create change. It's everything I'm passionate about. So it's exciting for me to be able to stand in front of a room of people and talk about the things that I'm really passionate about and have you all listen so intently. So thank you very much for coming. But are there any questions that I can answer for you? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I thought it was a great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
My question is, how do you, of the 6 voluntary organizations or NGOs or locations, how does your team come up with those 6? How do you choose which issues to focus on and which ones to direct your students toward?
So the question was, how do we identify those NGOs, those host communities abroad that we're going to work with? What are the criteria and how do we choose them as a team? Well, we did that in a number of ways. One was we developed that specific itinerary to offer a broad perspective of what the developing world looks like. Bolivia is small, growing very slowly. It has a large indigenous population that's still living relatively traditionally compared to many countries around the world. India is much larger, growing much faster. China is much larger still and growing much faster still. Vietnam is small, but industrializing quickly. So we really tried to give a broad perspective in that sense. The NGOs are selected specifically for their fit, and the communities that we go to are specifically selected for their fit. So we have many contacts around the world. Sandy and I are about to travel around the world for 3 to 4 months to each program country. And we'll be looking to make sure that the organizations that are out there that we're partnering with, one, have the capacity to support the students and offer the education that we need for them for this program. But two, we also want to make sure that this is an organization that has the capacity to use our students productively, that we're not going to be a hindrance on the organization. And three, we want to make sure that it's a community that can host this size group effectively without us being a hindrance on the development of the community. Bringing 16, 18-year-old students from the United States to a community in either rural or urban developing nations can have a huge impact. And we want to make sure that it's a community that is able to support us and that we're going to be a productive member of in the long term. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
More or less? Yeah, okay. I know I threw a lot at you, so please feel free. Yeah. I'm sorry, he beat you out there.
I've been to some of the countries you mentioned.
Yeah.
And while I was traveling, I often felt like I should do more than just being a backpacker through these places also. But like in Vietnam, Thailand, China,
Yeah.
language is often an issue.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering how in your program are you able to enable the students to contribute effectively if they're not speaking 6 languages?
Yeah, so the question is if there's a language barrier in countries, and you're speaking of your own experience traveling through Southeast Asia mostly, how do students become productive members of a community in a brief amount of time if they can't master the languages of those countries? It's a great question. A lot of these countries were specifically selected because there's a significant English-speaking population in them. Bolivia is a key example where that's not true. Sandy and I both speak Spanish fluently, so that will help to bridge a lot of those gaps in that country. India, South Africa, they're both significant English-speaking populations. Beyond that, China and Vietnam in particular, it will be a challenge. And one of the ways that we can do that is, A, finding communities where there are pockets of individuals, either university students or students who are individuals who are professionals who do have some English language skills. Hiring translators who become part of the program there, probably providing more than just translation services, but also helping us to build access to the individuals that we need in that local community and communities throughout the region. So it is a challenge. It's something we're going to face specifically in China and Vietnam out of that itinerary, but it's something that we are digging into. We are finding individuals that can help to provide those services that'll make it accessible, make the community accessible to students. Was that the same question? I saw you nodding quite a bit.
It was similar, but now I have another one.
Okay, go to it.
I think the most important part of the program is coming back and talking to the policymakers.
Right.
Do you have an idea how you can keep these people engaged? Or it's not going to be, oh, just one more group of eager students, saw the
Right.
world, yeah, we'll listen to them, fine.
Right.
Do
So
you have anything
Right. So the question is, how do you engage policymakers, particularly at the UN, the World Bank, and the IMF, on an annual basis, so that the policymakers will continue to come back to the table and that the students actually have something to contribute? Well, it's a very good question. The first thing is that the first answer to that is that all of these organizations do have educational arms. They are supposed to be reaching out to students in the United States and abroad. So in some ways, for us to be able to step forward and say, hey, we've got students who can come and they can have a substantive meeting with you. It will meet your educational requirements. It's easy. We're putting it on a platter for you in some ways. It's not necessarily a lobbying meeting. It's not necessarily specifically breaking apart policy, but simply a discussion that is an educational discussion. That's the first thing. Second thing is the United Nations offers consultancy status for nonprofits, particularly international nonprofits. And it's a few years down the road before we would be able to qualify for it, but that's the type of relationship that we'd be looking to build with these international policy organizations, is to have that type of consultancy status. So it's not easy. That is a difficult part of the program design, but we think it's critical. My experiences as an undergrad were, many of you are probably familiar with CalPERG. I was on the campus at UCLA working with CalPERG, and the best experiences I had in college were walking the halls of Congress in DC, lobbying for toxic right to know legislation, and walking through Sacramento, lobbying around the Clean Water Act. So I think it's a powerful experience to as a student, as a young student, to go to policymakers and actually have something substantive to say. You know, that experience is critical. Again.
What about visiting the programs that they fund? Like the IMF funds a big HIV program in South Africa. Maybe that would be a way to engage them. We're visiting
That's
the
right.
program, this is how we felt about it.
Absolutely. That was one aspect of it. Clearly the curriculum, because it's such an expansive amount of time, the curriculum is pretty expansive as well. So we're working with one NGO in each host country, but the project model for that month actually includes about 4 days a week of work with the NGO, and then the rest of the time is spent visiting other NGOs around the region, so that are working on the same issue, so that you not only get an in-depth look at this one NGO, but you get to see what other people in the region are doing and what different approaches people are taking. That'll give students a chance. As a result, they'll be exposed to undoubtedly projects that the World Bank, the IMF are funding, UN-sponsored programs as well. So that I think you're right. I think that will be a big part of our ability to speak with those organizations, because we'll have something substantive to say specifically about their projects. Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. Other questions? I should probably stop in a minute, but I'd be happy to answer one or two more. Yes, sir.
What is your organization's plan to expand in terms of number of people that are helping out? What are the opportunities outside of just kind of like directly supporting you guys? Are you looking to bring people on full time, or is it mainly volunteers? What's the strategy there?
Well, at the moment, we're putting in terms of the growth, we're putting our efforts into the fundraising phase. The expansion of the program in terms of our staff will begin in the spring, and we'll be looking to add probably just 2 staff for this first program year, and that will be the third person to travel with Sandy and I around the world, and then someone to provide assistance to Chris, who will stay here in the United States, continue operations, and begin to enroll students for the coming year so that the program continues to thrive. But beyond that, a lot of it is capacity building for the organization, building that community so that there are other nonprofits around the United States, there are other nonprofits internationally, there are other organizations that can provide services. A great example is our students will be interacting with school children here in the United States through video blog and text blogs, so that they'll have and chat. So they'll have the ability, possibly even through webcasting, to interact with students in a substantive way, younger students or their peers, about these issues that they're seeing. So finding individuals that can help to provide the resources, that can help to provide the infrastructure to do those types of projects and expand our capacity and our reach out into the US community and the global community, that's a huge part of a way that individuals can support Thinking Beyond Borders. Absolutely. One last question. Yes, ma'am.
When you're selecting your NGOs, do you review empirical evidence to make sure that you're selecting NGO that's not only good intentions, but actually effective?
Actually doing something. Well, yes, we do. The last thing that we want is to go to work with an NGO that is, the question was, do we review empirical evidence to make sure that the NGO that we're going to work with abroad is actually doing substantive work? They're not just there. Absolutely. There are a lot of NGOs internationally that are set up by individuals simply because they want to do good work, but they don't really have the capacity to do any good work. So it is important for us to review that. But I will say that our goal is not necessarily to work with all the greatest NGOs in the world. I mean, part of the reality of service learning and the reality of experiential learning is that sometimes things fail, and we learn a lot from the things that do fail. So we won't be looking for those nonprofits or those NGOs that are falling off the face of the earth because they just can't get it together. But we will be out there looking for a diverse experience, working with those NGOs that are really phenomenal. First one that comes to mind is BRAC out of Bangladesh. They do amazing, amazing work. And what a great opportunity to be exposed to a great NGO. But then there are lots of the small NGOs that just, for whatever reason, they can't pull the pieces together. Even if they have a great design, the pieces just won't come together for them. And that's important to see. It's critical for students to have a real understanding. I'm going to go ahead and stop because I'm way over time. But I want to thank you all again for coming out. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to stay and ask questions, I'll definitely be here. I'd love to hear comments, feedback about the program model. We're relatively new. We've been around for 2 years working on this idea. Chris approached me with it about 2 years ago. So it's a relatively new idea, and we're always looking for great constructive feedback. And of course, I'd encourage you to go to Thinking Beyond Borders if you haven't already. Sitting here in the audience, some of you I think may have already been there, but thinkingbeyondborders.org. Please check out our website, and you can always communicate with us there via email. So thanks again for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you.